YouTube, it's me, Joe, and I'm back with another reaction. And we're back with extra history. Yes, it has been so long since we did extra history. It was I think, if I remember correctly, it was the last video I did before my Pyromancers marathon. And now we're getting back to it. And through your voting, we have fallen on Catherine the Great. Probably the greatest ruler of the Russian Empire, in my mind. This should be a very interesting story, because Catherine the Great, oh my god, she is literally one of the greatest, if not the greatest, rulers of any of the previous foreign nations. Oh god, sorry, I'm still getting over COVID. Finally tested negative recently, so woohoo, but I still have some of the residual yuckiness. But yeah. Before we watch this video, though, make sure you like and subscribe, turn on notifications, and of course follow me on all my social media down below in the description. And if you want to support my channel, feel free to support me on Patreon. Oh, by the way, the reason that my intro was muted was basically because the intro music is officially copyrighted. Ugh. Because reasons! So, while I work on getting a new one set up, yes, I am making a new intro, so get ready for that. Yeah, please forgive the silence for now. Don't worry, a new intro will be arriving hopefully soon. As soon as me and my head admin and editor can figure out the time to do it. You know, we're all still busy with the holiday schedule. Anyway, we're here to watch Catherine the Great, so let's get this video started in 3, 2, 1, and play!
A young girl sits alone in a cold room in a great house on the German coast and dreams of being a queen. That girl's name was Sophia, or Sophie, depending on who's writing about her. She was born in the spring of 1729, but her mother would never forgive her for the crime of being a girl. Her mother, young, ambitious, always wanting to be the center of attention, was deeply discontent in her life, having been married off at 15 to a man 21 years her senior. Worse still, that man was poor, at least by her standards, and stuffy. Her life was nothing like the glittering court that she'd known as a girl. She still had ambition. She still wanted to escape her husband's drab military post, to live in high society and see the world. And to her mind, that required a male heir. And so, poor Sophia was neglected, often told that she was ugly, yelled at for minor offenses, or simply left entirely alone. She was bright and could memorize things with ease, but she frequently infuriated her tutors by asking questions like, why were the great men of antiquity damned just because they lived before Christ? Or, what was the universe like before creation?
Oh, so they didn't like her because she flippin'
She was taught by one of her governesses, who introduced her to French and brought her books by Racine and Molière. And all the while, her mother doted on her sickly and infirm brother, who'd been born a year and a half after she'd entered the world, unwanted. Sophia would always harbor a resentment over the treatment she received compared to her brother, but in 1742, when she was 13, her brother died, succumbing to scarlet fever. She had one other brother who would survive their youth, but he was a half-decade younger, and so now, at last, her ambitious mother's eye finally turned to her. But she didn't receive the warmth and the affection that she'd hoped for. Her mother's aim was to see her married. After all, her mother thought, taking her daughter out in search of a match, to travel and get back to court, might provide a path to escape her drab life. Unfortunately, her daughter was proud, impertinent, and arrogant, or at least so she felt. If there was to be any attempt at matchmaking, she was going to have to break
so she just basically had a mind of her own.
And so, Sophia
I don't know, I kind of like that
in
someone.
And her mother began writing and visiting
Makes
all
them
of her
interesting.
relatives in search of a match. And she made sure that Sophia knew just what failing to find a match would mean. From time to time, she would take Sophia to see spinster relatives locked away in a convent, or shut away in a remote wing of a family house. One of these encounters Sophia would remember forever. An aunt who lived in one small room with 16 pug dogs. 16 pugs who did everything that dogs do in that one room.
Oh my!
The smell would haunt her for all her days.
I don't blame her!
She rapidly became enamored of the idea of marriage. She saw it as a way out, an escape from her mother. But her prospects were limited. Her father was not a man of great means, and though he was a prince of one of the tiny principalities that then made up the Holy Roman Empire, he wasn't even the prince of that domain, having others in the line of succession before him. Her mother, on the other hand, was of the House Holstein-Gottorp, one of the great houses of the Holy Roman Empire, and though she was from a minor branch, she could still reach out to all her cousins. And so it was that, even before her brother
who knows?
died,
Maybe
on a
I'm
visit
somewhere
to
on
her
that
uncle,
tree, knowing my
Sophia
family.
met the orphaned Duke of Holstein, Peter Ulrich, 11 years old at the
Actually,
time.
I think mine's more...
This young man was the heir to the throne of
close.
Sweden, and the last surviving grandson of Peter the Great. He was also sickly, though, doughy of features, and even at the age of 11, given to drink. This meeting would prove fortuitous in years to come, or disastrous depending on how you look at it. But long before that chance encounter was to change her life, as she was making the rounds looking for a suitor, attention of this type fell on her much closer to home. At the age of 14, a 24-year-old cuirassier, her cousin, began to, what was called at the time, show his affections. Often,
Basically how to creep, yeah!
secluded corner of the house when no
Yeah,
one
as
else
it's
was
going,
around
yeah,
to kiss her.
courting methods
He
back then,
eventually
especially
proposed
among the
to her,
nobility,
although
were
she
extremely
expertly put him
creepy.
off by agreeing to it only if he could get the consent of her parents. Then, in the middle of dinner one night, a letter came. It was from Russia, from the Russian Empress, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, whose sister had married a Holstein. Elizabeth, who was the aunt of Peter Ulrich. Elizabeth, who had been betrothed at one point to Sophia's uncle. Elizabeth, whose association Sophia's mother had been very careful to cultivate, regularly sending her news and portraits of her daughter. Elizabeth had recently become the guardian of young Peter Ulrich, adopting him as her own. And as such, young Peter had lost the right to the crown of Sweden, but had gained a much greater prize, succession to the crown of Russia. Elizabeth's letter said nothing of its purpose, but simply implored Sophia and her mother to travel at once to Russia. Despite the letter's vagueness, the implications were clear. Sophia might yet find her way to being a queen, as she had so often daydreamed. But the night's surprises weren't over yet. Mere hours after the first letter's arrival, a second courier, breathless and panting, burst into the house. He too had a letter, but this one was from Frederick the Great, summoning him to his court in Berlin. Sophia's mother wasted
One of my
no
personal
time
favorite
starting
leaders
to
of
The
ancient
invitation
Europe,
to Russia had
and
come
a
with a banknote
possible
for 10,000
ancestor
rubles
of
to
you
equip
know
them for their journey.
who.
This, of course, went not to
Possible.
making sure that Sophia
There's
looked
no-
like a bride.
there's no way of
or
truly
who she
finding
would
out,
be,
like,
but instead
in-
went towards
Come-
outfitting her mother with a splendid
Right.
array of court dresses.
Come on!
And so they began their journey.
You're going there for
First
your
to
daughter!
Berlin,
Come on!
then to
Woman.
Moscow.
Ugh.
When they arrived at Berlin, Sophia's mother raced to present herself to Frederick. But, to her shock, he simply asked where her daughter was. She hadn't taken Sophia with her to court, thinking that the king couldn't possibly want to talk to the girl more
You'd
than
be
to her
surprised about
himself.
old Fritz.
So she said that Sophia was sick. The next day, too, she showed up at court alone, and again Frederick asked where Sophia was, and again her mother said that she was sick. On the third day, Frederick pressed the issue, and Sophia's mother said that she couldn't come because she had nothing to wear. At which juncture, a somewhat miffed Frederick the Great cut her off and asked one of his sisters to just lend the poor girl a dress, please. Finally, Sophia appeared before the king, in an ill-fitting dress without jewels or finery. She was shy, worried about what this great man might think. But to her surprise, and undoubtedly the surprise of her mother, she was seated at dinner that night right next to the king. Her mother wasn't even seated at the same table. The king tried to make her feel comfortable, speaking to her of poetry and of the opera,
Oh,
plays
yes.
and ballet. And though everybody stared at the king,
Frederick
talking to
was
a
quite a
child,
patron
he
of the
continued
arts.
on, and she opened up, speaking to him throughout the meal. By the end, he saw in her, hidden just below that layer of humility, an intelligence and a perception. He wrote to Elizabeth of Russia to say as much. He had been assessing her, because in his bid to make Prussia a player on the world stage, he had already created many enemies, and he knew that he would have to have Russia on his side. It was his hope that this German princess could help ensure that. But his business was not just with Sophia. In private, his agents asked her mother to be their agent in the Russian court. They explained how one Count Bestuzhev was the sworn enemy of Prussia, and that he would stop Sophia's marriage if he could. And so Sophia's mother, Johanna, should do everything in her power to make him lose favor. Never again would these two rulers meet in person. These rulers whom history titles the Great. But it's far from the last time that their paths will cross. Join us next time as Sophia finally makes her way to Russia, and her mother sets about trying to destroy Count Bestuzhev.
We already got in here, we've already met one of the greats. Excellent. Oh. And yes, Catherine is quite an interesting monarch. Though her early years definitely seem a little, well, shadowed over by apparently her very, I'm assuming jealous mother. From the sound of it, she just wants to be a court gossiper. But yeah, courting styles back then were creepy. Very creepy. Yes. Ugh. Though I didn't know her cousin. Ugh. Yeah, royal families. There's a reason we don't do what they did back then too. But yeah, and meeting Frederick the Great, who is probably one of the greatest rulers in Europe ever. And as I said, a possible ancestor of yours truly. Possible. The only evidence that allegedly we have to go on is basically a family tree of my family that's in a beer hall in Germany today, but I've never seen it. I've never seen any pictures of it. So I'm not entirely sure. What it said, what the only evidence I have to go on is word of mouth from my grandmother, whose mother, my great-grandmother, was a very rich and very noble woman, but I have no records to see that because all records in Germany are kind of hard to find nowadays. But accordingly, somewhere in Germany, there's a beer hall with my family tree on it, and it goes all the way up to the old kings of Prussia. So I don't know. I don't know. Though it is kind of interesting to think, me a descendant of Frederick the Great. Well, whatever. No matter what, I'm still happy right here. I'm not happy being a king, I'm happy being right here. Which also might lead to a few changes in my Discord server. Oh, but yes, and Frederick the Great, like, a lot of people, like, for those who study Prussia, like, they always, and plus, like, we heard back in Bismarck, whereas most states have an army, the Prussian army has a state. A lot of people don't know that, like, Frederick the Great, while he was a magnificent soldier and an absolutely brilliant tactician and military leader, he was also a full patron of the arts. He loved the arts. He loved opera. He loved the ballet. He loved poetry. He loved literature. He loved everything to do with the arts. And he was actually a very forward-thinking leader. He cared for his people. There are so many stories of when he's traveling through the country, he pulls his carriage over to talk with just some random farmers and ask them how the crops are doing and how things can be improved. He was a great lover, and not only that, incredibly forward-thinking, especially when it came to how he ruled. In fact, where most rulers wouldn't trust anybody with managing the kingdom if, say, they were off to war or something, he trusted his sisters impeccably. Which is, again, kind of a trait I share. I trust my sister more than I do anybody else. I go under for heart surgery or I get in an accident. I'm not calling my parents first. I'm calling my sister first. My sister's the one person I trust with everything. Not only that, he was also a great lover of dogs. In fact, if I remember correctly, like in his will, he asked to be buried with his greyhounds. You know, I'm actually starting to see a lot of similarities. Has adequate trust of his sister, is completely forward-thinking, somewhat of a strategist when it comes to war, but also a lover of the arts, loves his dogs. Kind of. Yeah, maybe there are some similarities. Who knows. But yeah, Frederick the Great, one of my favorite ancient rulers of Europe. He was a great man. Truly a great man. Truly a man deserving of the title, the Great. It's a shame that he and Catherine never, truly crossed paths again, face to face. But yeah, still interesting. And who knows what happens next with, well, Sophie right now, Catherine later. We shall see what happens. So, another fun video. And next video will be something that apparently has been requested, but I decided, you know what? It's time to try something new. So, yeah. Until the next video, You know who I am. I know who you are. I will see you all in the next video. Come, Koa. I still think I need to get... I still have a few of them. Like, yeah, buggy head. Well, it was still nice to do a video. Get back into my routine. Truly my routine.